Okay, it seems like we've got everyone now, so I think we should make a start. So thank you all for coming. Fiona, could I get the next slide, please? Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the launch event for the new Parish, Town and Community Councils Toolkit course. I'm Caelan Knight. I am the Local Authorities Coordinator at the Carbon Literacy Project. I'm going to be your host for today, so I'll be guiding you through the session, and we will be having a Q&A at the end hosted by myself. So welcome to the launch event for the Parish, Town and Community Councils Toolkit course. This is a new toolkit course produced by the Carbon Literacy Project, and it is part of the Local Authorities Toolkit, a suite of courses designed for delivery of carbon literacy training within local government. So today is designed to give you an overview of this new course, its development and content, and it will give you an overview of how you might be able to engage with carbon literacy training. We hope that today will kickstart the rollout of carbon literacy training across parish, town and community councils. So just before we get started, I'll just go through some housekeeping. So next slide, please, Fiona. So just to let you all know, we are recording this session. We will make a recording available after, following the session, so please keep an eye out for that. Attendee video and mics are turned off, only panelists are visible. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen for questions. So we'll be answering questions as we go in the Q&A function, but we'll also have an open Q&A at the end of the session, where we'll be fielding some questions to our various panelists. You could also ask a question following the session, so I will be sharing my email address. So if you would like to get in touch, maybe there's something more complicated or you would like to discuss the training, you can get in touch via there as well. Next slide, please, Fiona. So just a few acknowledgements. This toolkit is the result of the hard work of many different individuals and organisations, so it's only right that we give thanks to all of those. So the materials were funded by the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, the UK Government Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and Westford Mill. We're also grateful for the development of these materials, which was supported by Christiane Startin-Laurent of Laurent Training, Belinda Borden from Dorset Council. She's also a town councillor and co-founder of Dorset Climate Action Network, and she is a carbon literacy trainer. Speak Carbon Collective and Save Our Shropshire for piloting these materials and for providing invaluable insight and support. Thanks also goes to Manchester Metropolitan University and Rachel Coxcoon, formerly of the Centre for Sustainable Energy and now Director of Climate Guide, for their support. We're also very grateful to the National Association of Local Councils for granting us permission to reproduce excerpts from their climate change studies. Next slide, please, Fiona. As mentioned, today is all about providing an overview of carbon literacy and the new Parish, Town and Community Councils Toolkit course. So today is particularly useful for those working within parish, town and community councils and the wider local authority sector. However, if you are from another sector, don't worry, there's going to be plenty of general information about carbon literacy that you will also find useful. So today's agenda is as follows. We'll start with what is carbon literacy, so an introduction to the Carbon Literacy Project and the work that we do. We'll then give an overview of the Local Authorities Toolkit, followed by a more in-depth look at the materials contained within the new Parish, Town and Community Councils course. Then we will go to our guest speakers, so hosted by Phil Corbell, Director of Advocacy at the Carbon Literacy Project, We will hear from Councillor Belinda Borden, Councillor Christiane Startin-Laurent, Richard Watkins and Councillor Alan Wilson from Save Our Shropshire, Pete Watkins from Speak Carbon Collective. Following that, we will cover some next steps on how you might engage with this toolkit course and share some useful resources. We'll cover some frequently asked questions. Finally, we will have an open Q&A and we will finish by midday. So I'm now going to pass to my colleague Sarah. She's going to tell you a bit more about carbon literacy.
Thanks very much, Kaylin. And good morning, everybody. So my name is Sarah Davis, and I'm the Education Coordinator here at the Carbon Literacy Project. I work with colleges, sixth forms and universities to help them roll out carbon literacy. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about carbon literacy and what it is, explain carbon literacy training and the options that you have in bringing carbon literacy to your council so that you can begin to make the changes needed to work towards a low carbon culture and future. So let's begin. What is carbon literacy? So carbon literacy is defined as an awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities. But awareness on its own is not enough. Learners need to have the ability and the motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community and organisational basis. They need to commit to change and bring people with them, acting low carbon, buying low carbon and voting low carbon. Next slide, please, Fiona. So the Carbon Literacy Project began in 2012 in Manchester, and a group of about 30 people came together to decide what we need to do to act decisively on the climate crisis. The project founders and directors, Dave Coleman and Phil Corbell, decided that they wanted to emphasise working with and empowering people to have the agency to change. The Carbon Literacy Working Group created the Carbon Literacy Standard, which outlines the requirements for a training course that produces carbon literate individuals. This approach was piloted in Greater Manchester and began the coordination of the Carbon Literacy Project. This has overseen the expansion of the project across Greater Manchester, the UK, Europe and beyond. Carbon literacy has now been delivered in many countries, such as Australia, Canada, and most recently, Antarctica. The Carbon Literacy Project was established and now delivers on behalf of the Carbon Literacy Trust. Next slide, please, Fiona. The Carbon Literacy Standard has 4 key elements that must be present in all training: the learning method, knowledge, values, and action. And I'm going to talk about each in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. So we'll begin by looking at the learning method. So we offer anyone who lives, works or studies a day's worth of learning about climate change. And to make the most impact, carbon literacy needs to be local learning, or in other words, learning that's specific to the learner's role and locality, ensuring learning is relevant and resonates with learners. Carbon literacy offers a space for collaboration and peer-to-peer learning and opportunities to jointly develop ideas and solutions. All carbon literacy courses are certified against the Carbon Literacy Standard, and learners who successfully complete a day's worth of approved carbon literacy learning are certified as carbon literate. And carbon literacy is a globally unique, adaptable framework that can be applied anywhere. The UN at COP21 recognised us as one of 100 transformative actions programmes worldwide that could materially change the way that we deal with climate change. Next slide, please. In terms of knowledge, the training covers what climate change is and how we know what it is, including aspects such as the greenhouse effect. We look at the impact it's already having locally and globally, and the predictions of where we're heading and where we could be heading. We look at the policy position from the Paris Accord and the function of the various COPs, as well as the UK government's net zero goals. And then we focus on carbon footprints at a local, organisational and individual level. so that learners understand where they can make changes to reduce emissions in order to have the greatest impact. Next slide, please. So carbon literacy training is underpinned by a set of values. The power of individual action. What we do can and does make a difference. And the learning needs to emphasize the actions that we can take instead of the things that we can't. And learners need to know what they can do to reduce emissions in their professional and personal lives. But individual change in and of itself is not enough. We need to work with others to create the changes that we need. And the outcome of the changes that we need can lead to a better world and a better way of life. For example, less air pollution reduces emissions, which is better for our home, i.e. planet Earth, but it's also better for our health. Less respiratory diseases, meaning less impact on the NHS. So covering the co-benefits of tackling climate change is a key thing. And equity and fairness and issues around climate justice, these are also covered as they underlie the changes that we need. And the training also needs to acknowledge that for some people, addressing climate change carries with it enormous emotional content, and this shouldn't be ignored, but acknowledged and used to drive action. Next slide, please. As part of all carbon literacy courses, all learners must commit to both an individual and a group action that will lead to significant carbon saving. And ideally, both actions should be in the context in which the learning takes place. So ideally, learners should be sending in work-based actions in the first instance. And we prefer work-based actions because actions at work will collectively lead to a greater difference and instill a low carbon culture by putting climate change on the agenda of every organisation and making it a priority. These changes can lead to a systemic cultural shift within an organisation, helping it to work towards the government's net zero goals. These two action pledges need to be proportionate to the learner's role and the sphere of influence. These action pledges are sent to us by the trainer, and successful participants are then awarded a carbon literacy certificate. Next slide, please. We have certification pathways for both individuals and for organisations. For individuals who are awarded a carbon literacy certificate, there's an option to become a carbon literate facilitator or trainer. However, you don't actually need to be a certified trainer to deliver training. The people that become certified trainers are often those who routinely deliver training for a living. We also have a carbon literate organisation accreditation scheme, which offers organisations a visible badge to showcase their commitment to a low carbon culture. Next slide, please. Since the charity was launched in 2012, over 53,000 people have been certified as carbon literate. And as learners must pledge at least 2 actions, that means over 106,000 actions have been pledged, although many learners actually pledge more than 2 actions. And just to give you a sense of scale, we're certifying around 2,000 learners per month, and we've doubled the number of learners that we've certified since January 2022. And this means that we estimate 193,000 tonnes of carbon have been saved so far. And Jacobs UK has found savings of between 5 and 15% to be regularly demonstrated on similar behavioural approaches to carbon literacy. So scaling this across a whole organisation or locality offers great potential to achieve the necessary cultural shifts in order to play your part in limiting global heating to below 2 degrees and as close to 1.5 as possible. Next slide, please. So carbon literacy is in lots of sectors and organisations. For example, various universities, colleges and sixth forms have their own carbon literacy courses. Manchester Metropolitan and Nottingham Trent universities have both produced carbon literacy toolkits which are credited and shareable and are used widely across the sector. Next slide, please. Healthcare services recognise that climate change is a public health issue. And here are some of the NHS trusts who have carbon literate staff and colleagues supporting change within the NHS. Next slide, please. There are a number of different groups who've created their own courses for community-based delivery. And this work helps to engage with concerned citizens and disenfranchised communities, empowering local people to rally for climate action. Next slide, please. And it's been widely cascaded across various civil service departments. Next slide, please. We also work with many companies and organisations in both the private and the public sectors. Next slide, please. As with the accreditation body and award certificates, we don't deliver any training. The training can either be delivered in-house or by external training providers. External training providers can deliver training to an organisation, or they can run courses which are open for anyone to attend in the sector. And if you want to know more about this option, just contact us and we'll be able to put you in touch with carbon literacy trainers or connect you to open training courses. Next slide, please. In the early days of carbon literacy, an organisation would create their own course using supported materials provided by us, and we would then check the proposed learning and materials to ensure that they met our carbon literacy standard with a view to accrediting the materials. And we still offer this option because it means that the course can be tailored and made relevant to any organisation or audience. Next slide, please. But then Patrick Alcorn, the head of local energy from the UK Government Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, realised that there was a huge potential to speed up the rollout of carbon literacy. BEIS offered us the initial funding to develop off-the-shelf toolkit courses that are in a ready-to-go, easily accessible format for 5 different public sector audiences. These audiences are central government, local authorities, universities, the NHS and blue light services. And this means that organisations within those sectors could come along and pick up the toolkit, adapt a few slides, and then use it to deliver a day's worth of carbon literacy training specific to their needs. Next slide, please. So as toolkit courses are pre-accredited, this helps to eliminate course development and accreditation time. The toolkits are as close as possible to being off the shelf, but they're still flexible and adaptable, meaning that training can reflect the local and organisational context. They're specific to each sector, ensuring that climate change is relevant to learners within different settings. And anybody can deliver the training. We just recommend that the trainer is carbon literate and comfortable facilitating training. Next slide, please. There's now at least one toolkit available in each of the 5 public sectors that BEIS commissioned us to develop, and the success of these toolkits has led to a much wider private sector toolkit production. And we'll also be launching a toolkit for the sports sector soon, which will be able to be used by any sports club, venue, organisation to deliver carbon literacy. But right now, I'm going to hand you back over to Kaylin, who will tell you more about carbon literacy in local authorities.
Thanks, Sarah. So as local authorities coordinator at the Carbon Literacy Project, my work focuses on rolling out carbon literacy within local authorities. So within higher tier local authorities, but also now with parish, town and community councils. So some of you from the sector might recognise this graphic from the Committee on Climate Change, and it essentially outlines the various emissions that local authorities are responsible for. So obviously many have internal emissions that account for 2% of the total for the UK. But importantly, they can also influence 33% of UK emissions. So clearly there's a real responsibility, but also opportunity for local authorities to reduce emissions across the country. They have the power and influence to catalyse decarbonisation, especially within the communities that they serve. Many councils have recognised this, and over 3/4 have declared a climate emergency. But answering the question of what next, what can they do and how is a bit more challenging. Councils are very broad organisations, so there are many people doing many different functions, organising services, maintaining facilities. So many people have various different jobs, and ensuring that climate change relates to the decisions and the responsibilities of these various different roles is a real challenge. So essentially, that's why we came up with carbon literacy for local authorities. We wanted to ensure that climate change could speak to these many different functions of these broad and diverse organisations. Next slide, please, Fiona. So with funding from BEIS, we created the Local Authorities Toolkit to speak to these challenges. So this was created in 2020. And it is a suite of resources for the delivery of certified carbon literacy training within local authorities. So what does it do? It's designed to help local authorities develop a low carbon culture across the various different functions and decisions that people are making every day, reducing both internal and external emissions. It's designed for peer-to-peer delivery, so it's designed for internal delivery by peers, but it can be also delivered via external trainers, and it's licensed for the purposes of delivering carbon literacy training. The toolkit is currently free. This was funded by, yes, the now defunct BEIS, but from October 2023, there will be a license fee payable to access updates every 3 years, so it'll be a 3-year license. But for now, the only other costs are a £10 certification fee, so that each learner who goes on the course, they pledge their 2 actions and they pay £10 to apply for their carbon literate certification. Next slide, please, Fiona. So here I just wanted to highlight some of the many local authorities who've been involved in the production of the Local Authorities Toolkit. Obviously, a lot of the work has come from the Carbon Literacy Project, but given that carbon literacy is all about peer-to-peer learning, the materials were developed with a writing group of various different local authorities, to ensure that it wasn't just us kind of speaking about climate change, but it was making sure that we heard from a range of different organisations. Next slide, please. So as Sarah discussed, carbon literacy is all about climate change education that is specific to the learner and their role, their responsibilities, and their decision making. So the toolkit itself is a suite of courses aimed at different audiences within the sector. Previously, we had 3 courses, so a generic staff course, so this was aimed at anyone working within a local authority. We developed a leadership and management course, so this really focused on the leadership responsibility of those leading councils, ensuring that they could make low carbon decisions across the local authority. We also have an elected members course. So the elected members course focuses a lot on communicating climate change, so to their wider constituents, as well as working to reduce internal emissions. And more recently, we have launched the Parish, Town and Community Councils course. I'll also just note we have the Community Leaders course we will be launching in summer. This is a course designed for local authorities to start to roll out that decarbonisation and that climate change training outside of the local authority to ensure they can influence external emissions as well. Next slide, please. So you might wonder, okay, you're hearing from this charity, how's it all going? So it has become very established within the local government sector. So I thought I'd just share a few figures for you. So 8,804 staff from local authorities have been certified as carbon literate. 3,750 learners have certified using the Local Authorities Toolkit or an adaptation of the toolkit. So remember, we started in 2012 and we released the Local Authorities Toolkit in 2020. So it's really impressive that in less than 3 years, 3,750 people have used the toolkit. 235 local authorities have delivered training internally or via an external trainer. And so as a result of all of this work, there's been over 17,600 carbon reduction actions pledged by local authority staff. So if you consider the impact of that, both internally but externally as well, that's a really big carbon reduction saving. So we do feel like this is having a really big influence in the sector. And just on councillors, there's been over 800 councillors now certified as carbon literate. So it's becoming, yeah, I think we can safely say it's becoming well established within the sector. Next slide, please, Fiona. So these are carbon literate organisations, and please forgive the Jenga I played trying to get all of these logos on the slide, but I thought it would be useful sharing, especially given many of the parish, town and community councils who are attending this session might see their local authority represented here. So these carbon literate organisations have embedded carbon literacy throughout their organisation and are aiming to train as many staff as possible. So perhaps if you see your local authority there, they could be a really excellent supporting network for you to start to deliver training. They can act as conveners, provide training capacity, guidance, and also start to develop training for the wider area. Next slide, please, Fiona. So our latest released course, the Parish, Town and Community Councils course. So this has been co-written and piloted by parish and town councils, similar to the other local authorities courses. It is available for internal delivery or via an external trainer. It is free for parish, town and community councils to access until October 2023. And from October, parish, town and community councils can still continue to access the toolkit if they would like to deliver internal training. But there will be a license fee of £300 for county associations and higher tier authorities that we foresee will act as conveners and provide training capacity for this course. For training providers and out of sector organisations, the price will be based on their organisational turnover. I'm now going to pass to Will, who's going to explain a bit more about the content of the Parish, Town and Community Councils course.
Thanks, Kaylin. I'm Will, and I've been supporting with the development of the materials. With over half of the emissions cuts needed to meet net zero, relying on decisions that are made at a grassroots and individual level, councillors and officers have an especially important leadership role to play in their community. The course provides councillors and officers with the support and the materials needed to deliver a day's worth of practical, action-based learning that enables their peers to gain the knowledge and the skills needed to address the climate emergency and the tools to engage their local community. The materials are as close to off the shelf as possible, yet adaptable to meet your needs. The pack is in an easily accessible format for in-house delivery and consists of all the resources needed to deliver training. That's slides, a really comprehensive trainer manual that guides you through every step of the training, activity resources, and a getting started pack. We've also included a list of resources and then the evidence forms where learners commit to their action pledges. These evidence forms are then sent to us by the trainer following the training. Next slide, please. The course is designed to be a flexible and adaptable framework for a day's work or 7 to 8 hours of action-based learning. However, that day's worth of learning doesn't all need to happen on one single day. It can be split up however you like. However, we do recommend that there's not more than a week between sessions, if possible. The materials have been written primarily with Zoom and Microsoft Teams in mind, but we will be releasing a version of the course which has detailed instructions for face-to-face delivery in the coming months. To create a dynamic learning environment and to cater to different learning styles, there is a mix of trainer-led learning, group discussion, activities, case studies, reflection, and videos. Next slide, please. So what's actually in the course? So the course is designed to guide learners towards making informed decisions and taking action in line with your council's priorities and ambitions. We want to empower learners to not only make changes in their professional and personal lives, but to bring others with them. To achieve low carbon culture change, you need to say why it matters, and then go on to equip people with the tools to act. So it starts with a grounding in climate change science and impacts. In the next module, we cover climate change policy from an international level right down to your council's climate policy. The key focus throughout the training are the many and wide-ranging co-benefits of taking action, and case studies of how other parish, town, and community councils are taking action. Learners also explore their personal carbon footprint before moving on to work-based emissions under their influence, and how they can integrate climate change into their decision-making and role. Another key learning outcome is to further equip learners with the tools and the strategies to effectively communicate climate change within their sphere of influence, and how to engage the local community. At the end of the course, learners engage with their council's priorities and ambitions by committing to taking one significant individual action and one significant group action to lower their carbon footprint within their remit as a councillor or officer. Next slide, please. So let's take a very brief look at a few of the slides. So this slide is from the climate science and impact section, and it shows where current global policies will lead to in terms of the global temperature rise. It highlights the huge difference between where we are and where we need to be. We appreciate that climate change is an ever-changing topic, so we regularly update the materials to stay up to date with the latest science and policy. Next slide, please. So throughout the course, we've included a number of blue slides. These blue slides are designed to be edited so that you can include information about your local area, your council's policy, and carbon footprint. And if you wish to adapt the materials beyond the blue customizable slides, that's not a problem. We can support you through the process of adding your own content, and then we review the materials to ensure that they meet the carbon literacy standard. On this slide, you can add your local area's carbon footprint from Impact. Impact is a digital visualization tool developed by the Centre for Sustainable Energy in partnership with the University of Exeter to help you to understand the sources of carbon emissions in your area. By focusing on the largest emitting sectors in your area, you and your peers can reflect upon what actions and what policies will have the greatest impact in reducing your local area's carbon footprint. Next slide, please. Carbon literacy is a very real and practical means to share and showcase best practice throughout your council and the communities you serve. Case studies and tools have been carefully selected to ensure that they inspire learners and that they resonate, no matter where your council is within the UK. This slide is from our co-benefits activity, where learners discuss the different co-benefits associated with each case study and explore how council priorities and climate strategy can be more closely aligned. We are very grateful to the National Association of Local Councils, who have also very kindly granted us permission to use case studies of climate action. Next slide, please. There's also a strong emphasis on group inquiry, engaging and collaborating with peers, and drawing upon each other's insights and experiences. As local councils are closest to their constituents, there is a unique opportunity to really understand the needs of local residents and to include them in plans to mitigate and adapt to climate change. In this activity, learners are divided into small groups. Each group discusses ideas on what would most effectively engage their local community in taking action. At the end of the activity, each group then pitches their best idea to the rest of the room. Next slide, please. I'm now going to hand over to Phil, our Director of Advocacy, so that we can hear from our guest speakers who have piloted the course. Over to you, Phil.
Thanks very much indeed, and thank you, colleagues, for such a concise explanation of what was quite a lot going on here, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. So, hello, I'm Phil Corbell. I'm co-founder of the Carbon Literacy Project and its Director of Advocacy, which is my excuse for talking probably too much, so forgive me, as we go a bit more freeform, freed from the constraints of slides and the like. But what my colleagues have laid out is what we've been developing and what's going to be available to you. But there's nothing quite like hearing from folk that have already been doing it, as you'll have heard. There's quite a lot of work and piloting's been going on so far. So I'm going to talk to two groups of people that have been involved in developing and delivering this. And the first folk I'm going to talk to are Christiane Statin-Laurent and Belinda Borden, who are going to introduce themselves. Christiane, tell us about where are you, what do you do, and reveal that you're a councillor as well.
Thank you very much, Phil. So yeah, my name is Christiane, and thank you very much for everybody with a lovely pronunciation of my name. I love to hear that always. I'm based in Leicester, Leicestershire, where I'm living, but also actually being a carbon literacy trainer. I've been fortunate to be able to train this out across the whole of the UK as part of an SME course that I was focusing on to start with. I've also been able to support another carbon literacy trainer with local community carbon literacy training in our Leicestershire area, which links in a little bit then again when we're looking at the local authorities, Leicestershire County Council being one that has been very much at the forefront, also helping these toolkits. So brilliant to see also that the community got involved. Also other local authorities across the country where I've been approached to train out SMEs, but also councillors and staff. So from that picture, it's always amazing to see how all these things fit in. And I was really excited when I heard that the parish and town council toolkit was on the go as well. So really put my hand and my interest up straight away to be able to pilot that at my local council where I'm a town councillor too. Because it's really, when you do the training, I think you just see, and I think one of the questions in the Q&A was about how does that all link in with businesses and the community, and it's perfect because you will see with those thousands of carbon literate people now across the country and internationally, people know it, and it really helps for it all to fit in across all of our society.
Thanks very much. That's a great start. Belinda, where are you? And I've got to admire those beach hats to die for, really. Where are you, and what's your role within the council?
So I'm in Lyme Regis on the Devon-Dorset border of the south coast here. So that's where the beach hats are. I like to have photos of my local area. So yeah, I sort of have a teaching background, and also I'm a geographer, so I've always been interested in the whole sort of environmental and climate change, and very frustrated at the lack of political will as I saw it. So stood as a town councillor in 2019 in Lyme Regis, and then stood in a by-election for Dorset Council last year, and did not expect to be elected, but was. And I think that's partly a recognition from the public that people who are trying to do something about the climate and environmental emergency are what the general public respond to and want us to do things. So yes, I've been talking to Phil on and off for years about the climate literacy and how do we engage people locally in it. So yeah, like Christiane, I was very excited to hear about the pilot and pitched in and trained some of my local councillors and a few community leaders in the different sessions. So that's where we got to.
Great, and obviously that fed into what we're launching today, Belinda. Tell us about how it went. Who was in the room? Where would you sort of gauge them in terms of their sort of knowledge and enthusiasm for the subject?
Well, interestingly, I started. So the first one I did was actually a full day face to face in a little room that overlooks the coast. And it was mostly town councillors, but I have to say it was mostly those who saw themselves as they described them as you're preaching to the converted. But I did also invite neighbouring parish councils and the neighbouring town, but in both directions. So we had Devon and Dorset, as well as I say, a couple of community group sort of chairs of local groups, which I found was a really good mix. Yeah, they saw themselves as the converted, but they hadn't understood it fully. The science stuff was really quite new to them, and that was really interesting to me because it kind of made sense about the decision making in the sort of intervening years since I'd been elected.
Great, that's really interesting. I mean, a lot of feedback we get is that people feel, yes, it's a concern. What can we do? And so moving people along from their perceptions, well, we think it's this, and maybe it's that, and then crucially moving people into action was so important. Christiane, when you've been training people in this zone, again, how have you seen it go yourself? What have been the sort of key moments for you?
I think same as Belinda as well. It's getting those people in a room, and they were all, actually it was one of the comments that came from the training. They were so happy to actually be at the specific dedicated training than being in the usual committees where these points are being discussed. Really felt they had the opportunity to actually talk some of these subjects through a bit more at length as a group, which I found very encouraging, and it was fantastic to hear. So yeah, I think seeing also the link between the councillors. We had a mixed group of councillors with different leadership roles as well, and also member of staff. And that is really crucial. I think, as Linda mentioned, she had some community leaders also in her course. And I think that is really the link, because for parish and town council, they're so down on the ground with local residents. It's fantastic actually to have those different groups all included in one room, and brilliant actions will come from that.
One of our aspirations for carbon literacy is it helps to break the issue out of its eco niche and brings it into, even if we're starting with enthusiasts, brings that broader awareness of where it lands across the breadth of council responsibilities. Belinda, did you get a sense of that sort of thing going on? And if so, how?
Yeah, definitely. I think being very, very clear about the roles and responsibilities at town and parish council level was really helpful, because I think that up until then there'd been an awful lot of, oh, well, we'll wait to hear from Dorset Council, or we'll wait to hear from the government. That's not our role. Whereas when we drill down into just how much we can do, not just in terms of influencing our community, but actually there are a lot of things within our roles of town and parish councils that we can easily lead on, influence, and also lobby upwards to say, yes, here we are, we're doing this, what can you do as a higher tier authority to support us in this? So yeah, I think, as Christiane said, having a few slightly different roles in the room, so community people there to reassure councillors that yes, we're with you as well, we would like you to do this, and we will help roll it out in the community. And yeah, the second one I did deliver 2 half days with mainly aimed at the staff, 2 half days online, but again with community members. And so it was really interesting to kind of reassure town and parish councillors and the staff that people in the community will be there to support the rollout and that this is what they want them to be doing. And I think that was really important, because I think the councillors didn't really understand their roles and responsibilities and felt that perhaps we needed more coming down from above to guide us rather than us initiating and leading and influencing.
That's so much to unpick there, Belinda, which is exactly why we're talking. Christiane, I mean, were you picking up a similar sort of thing? That I remember an early conversation with Belinda reflecting on a sense of, who are we? We're tiny with no budget and, you know, very few staff. What can we do? And yet that realization that the mandate and the network of stakeholders actually can unlock significant action at your level. Is that something that was coming through for yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can just 100% echo that. I've previously in council meetings heard that quite a lot, as in, yeah, we're waiting, things will come from top to down. And then having the training and also seeing our council was brilliant. They put a climate strategy forward to then really see these actions and councillors really understanding how they can actually even contribute more to it, because again, these strategies sometimes think they've been again proposed and elaborated maybe at a different level, to really see how each and every one of us councillors can actually make an impact there. And reading afterwards the action pledge and seeing the variety of ideas that come through is always the best part for me. I love always doing that, and even going back to just to relook again what creativity and what they then see can be done within their local area, be it from transport, and also that understanding what is the biggest impact, where every council is different. Again, if you're closer to a city, you will have different challenges than if you're rural, and to really understand and getting that information, what it is that we need to focus on now in our area. That's the brilliant thing about this training, that it is very localized, with all the information and material that they can then go away with to then explore different avenues to loans or EV charging, anything like that, that they can really take away and work on those.
Fantastic. Obviously, most people that are with us today, and by the way, thanks for the extraordinary turnout. If we're talking about needing to show that there's interest in this, we have 222 people on this call, which is superb. But going back to what you were saying, every training session, every carbon literacy training course is something that drives action. Every learner has to devise the best thing they can do as an individual and as a group, typically at the workplace. It's the sticking together of it all. You get loads and loads of information and inspiration, but then you have to stick it all together and say, right, I'm going to do this. Belinda, if you had to, I really should have asked you to prepare this. If you had to choose one thing that really stands out, that's inspired you, that's come out of your pledged actions.
Ooh.
Yeah, sorry.
I think it was, that's a tough one.
It is.
I know that the urgency and the realization that we can't just leave it to wait for our higher tier authority or whoever to tell us specifically what to do. So we set up an environment committee, which we didn't have before at the town council. I mean, that would have been set up anyway, but I definitely feel that all of the people on the environment committee did do the carbon literacy training. And what we've actually managed to do is, so we're actually unusual in Lyme Regis in that we do actually have quite a healthy income. We own a couple of our car parks. So we are unusual in town and parish councils. So what we've been able to do, I requested, I have to say in some frustration, a budget for environmental and climate action in the community to engage the community in this. So I asked for 100,000 based on what my other bigger town councils in Dorset had achieved. I got 75,000 over the term of the council. And from that budget, we've been actually funding some really exciting community projects, not necessarily run by the town council, but people have come to us and said, we really like that you're doing this, and we have this proposal. So we've got things like the Great Big Dorset Hedge, which is part of the Dorset Climate Action Network, but we're doing a pilot in Lyme Regis, which will spread sort of education and awareness of the biodiversity benefits of proper hedging. We're supporting our river environmental action group, and they have been doing fantastic partnership work with South West Water and the Environment Agency, and have had, you know, genuine success in that. So I think it's creating the environment, putting the funding behind it, and then supporting the groups that are coming up with concrete proposals.
Superb. And also how those different issues link together as well. So Belinda, Christian, you've had time to think about an outstanding action that would inspire.
Well, I've seen, having people from the leadership team as well, how they could really then link it with a long-term and medium-term strategy that they put in place, and again how everything and every part fits in. So it's not just, you know, one big thing we do now and then we're finished. I think the penny drop for people that this is something that is ongoing now, and sort of every decision also is part of it. So I can see that now, being part of the planning and environment committee, you know, planning decisions now, even though there isn't a legal requirement yet to put in sustainability measures, this is now something that's going to start to be being mentioned. And again, that is a message that's being put across to any person that's applying for planning permission, that they see, oh, actually, the council is actually on the ball with this. We need to start to look into that. So it's really that being at the forefront and being a leader within your community, and a support also for information. That's not there with a stick, but really just to give the right hints and guidance to get to that.
Getting it in the room. Fantastic. Christian, Belinda, thank you so much for the work you put in. Thanks for talking to us just now. Yeah, if you're watching this, obviously Christian and Belinda are great, you know, sources of knowledge that we'll be able to tap into as this thing spreads. Meanwhile, in Shrewsbury, it means we go swiftly on to our other group of guests who have been piloting this in Shrewsbury, they being Richard Watkins and Alan Wilson and Pete Watkins. Richard, could you introduce yourself, tell us who you are and a bit about your organisation? Yeah, and you're on mute. Sorry, you get the prize for the first person on mute. In this. There you go.
Thank you. It's probably best for me to be mute most of the time. But thanks very much indeed, Phil, for asking so long. Yeah, the background to this is, for myself, is I've spent 35 years working with manufacturing industries, bringing about cultural change, behavioural change, and the like. And my son, Pete, started to ask me if I could help him with carbon literacy. And I was delighted to try and help him develop a householders course. And I saw this problem as very much about behavioural change and about cultural change. And I met up with Alan. And basically, we formulated Save Our Shropshire to deliver to something like 200,000 households in Shropshire the need to change. And what we see and what we saw and what was sort of brilliant about the Parish and Town Council Toolkit is that parish and town councils can be the core to trying to get local households to change their behaviour, because I fundamentally believe, and it's just an obvious belief, but it's key, is that without every household changing their behaviour, this ain't going to work, right? You know, like we need people to change diets, and if they change their diets, it'll change the food industry, etc., etc. So we set up, using the Parish Town Council Toolkit, to bring about behaviour change. Fantastic.
More on that in a minute. You name checked some pup called Pete, related to you. Pete, just give us a bit of context about yourself and Speak Carbon, the collective.
Yeah, so I came at this a few years ago when I had the sort of aha moment. This is a real problem. What can I do? Carbon literacy was my vessel, I suppose, to do something for in my head, my mind. It was the motivation to create a better future. So yeah, I started designing courses. My dad is on the call, came along on one of them, and there's some transformation there. But we've now developed a few years on a professional network of carbon literacy trainers. So we are accredited trainers. We go in and provide support wherever we can and provide training where we need to as well.
And you've been part of, there's a great story here, which we're going to have to curtail quickly, but sorry about that, but crucially, you've also been training councils and have played a role in developing this. We'll come back to you in a minute because I want to just hear from Alan. Alan, if you could quickly introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks, Phil. Good morning, everyone. Bottom line is I'm a councillor. I've got a parish council where I'm the chairman. We have no physical assets other than the street lights, so they're LED already. It's as simple as that. That was an easy win for me. However, I also are part of SALC, which is the Shropshire Association of Local Councils, where I'm vice chair. And my particular remit is climate change matters. So obviously this was a no-brainer. Once I got into that role, I could see the advantage of what was needed to be done. I've come from a farming background, so I've always been environmentally aware. And obviously during my very checkered career through my life, 31 years as a police officer, then into training, then into meeting Richard through various groups around the county. But we could see a shortfall in relation to people. It's nice to plant trees, it's nice to do all those things, but climate change needs people change. And that was where our mentality was. And that's why Rich and I got together. And it was brilliant that Pete was in the background there with the connections with carbon literacy. So we all came together in a sense, pulled the courses together. And obviously I'm in a position where I can float stuff across the whole county. And that was my ambition, to try and get as many, certainly parish and town councils engaged, but particularly the clerks, because the clerks are the engine behind the parish and town councils. Apart from the elected bodies on the parish councils, then influencing the councillors to come along. And of course, that's been a tall order. But having said that, at least the product of the carbon literacy course is one that you can have a complete novice, or you can have somebody with knowledge. And then what it does is actually give them a level playing field. By the end of the course, everybody is up to speed. Everybody understands what's going on, i.e. globally and locally. And then they go away with this confidence to be able to do more. And it's building them up to have that confidence to be able to go and take it forward within their own communities. I'm going to stop at that.
Alan, that's wow, fantastic introduction. I'm going to do that terrible live broadcast thing. We are running out of time, folks. Give me, Richard and Pete, could you give me an example of where it's just landed, something that encapsulates the power of this training in a parish council or local council setting? Richard.
So one example was someone who came from a local town council. So they thought they knew it all, thought they knew all about the science, and they'd done a lot. However, the one thing that came out of it was the idea that there are ways in which you need to communicate to people, and getting that communication right is important. And there's a brilliant bit of work in the Parish and Town Council Toolkit, which talks about the different types of people and how you address them. And more importantly, how you listen to people in order to get the message across. Because I personally believe there's too much talking and not enough listening, and therefore not enough action. And that's, I think, a sort of brilliant part of the Parish and Town Council Toolkit to get the action to happen, because you outlined that up front, Phil. This is about action, not talking about it.
Yeah, and that engagement piece. It's funny. I mean, okay, I was emphasizing action, but actually, we often frame the Carbon Literacy Project as a culture shift project. Until the conversation is underway and embedded as meaningful and relevant, you know, when else are you going to get that action and building up that capacity? And I love what you're saying there, Richard, about confidence, because people say, I want to do something. What can I do? Pete, an example of something that came out of the training?
Yeah, someone last week chucked a bag of sweets on my training table and said, right, you've got to pick the best pledge now, and I refused to do it. I'm like, refuse to pick a best one again because it's too difficult. But
sorry.
It's a good question, and what I'll do is build on what some of the other people have been talking about here, which is that aha moment when you go into the training. I can't do anything. This is someone else's problem. There are bigger things at play. There are bigger countries. Some people say there's you know, they redirect it, and then you start to talk about this. And Belinda brought this out a little bit. You start to recognize that you can do things, that you can make change. And then you see these pledges that come out to say, I'm going to go and do this within my community. I'm going to write this blog. I'm going to go and talk to these people. And then they say, is this really a pledge? And I say, absolutely, this is what you need to be doing. And you know, this particular toolkit, this particular level of engagement is super exciting because of the types of conversations that might be happening within households or communities as well.
I should also emphasize that the kit comes in a way that is, how can I say this, politics neutral. It brings it to where you are and enables the group to frame this around existing priorities and values. Yeah, and again, you know, it doesn't matter what political badge you're wearing. This is all about optimizing what you can do, whoever you are, wherever you are. And that seems to be a recurring theme throughout this. I just need to emphasize it because we're going to have to wrap up, but I hope we can hear more, and we will transmit more of these great examples as this toolkit gets rolled out as well. I hope you're sensing that there's already great potential in this and a great deal of success behind this already. So I wish we could have heard more from Shrewsbury. My bad, poor chairing. But we will have a chance to ask questions towards the end of this session. I'm going to conclude just to reflect that most of you will be aware that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change brings out a synthesis report today, as in bringing together a whole load of the science on this. To be blunt, this isn't going to be good news. I think we don't need a crystal ball for that. And I mention it because it's all the more urgent that we mobilize our communities and start to utilize tools like carbon literacy to do that. Belinda, Christiane, Richard, Alan, Pete, thanks so much for joining us today. I wish we could have had more time for you, but maybe we can chip in the questions. But I'm going to hand over to Will to pick up on some of the feedback so far. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Phil, and of course to all of our guest speakers. Just wait for the slides to load. Ah, fantastic. There we are. So in this section, I'm just going to run through some frequently asked questions. So why is carbon literacy a day's worth of learning? So there's a wealth of evidence which proves that carbon literacy training changes people's behaviour and enables and motivates them to take action on climate change. The time is needed for learners to understand the scale of the challenge in the first half of the course, before then learning about the specific and significant actions that they can take in the second half. Only learners who have completed a day's worth of approved carbon literacy learning and met the accreditation requirements can be certified as carbon literate. There are many different ways to deliver carbon literacy, and training can be delivered over several sessions. Can anyone use the toolkit? The materials can be used by anyone who is delivering certified carbon literacy training to parish, town, and community councils. We strongly recommend that anyone who is interested in delivering the training goes on an open carbon literacy course or sits in on another council session and becomes carbon literate themselves first to get an idea of how the training runs. We'll be sharing links to open training courses shortly when we cover next steps. Something that we often get asked is, can I deliver training to a different audience? As you've already heard, we have a number of toolkits that are designed for specific audiences. If you'd like to deliver training to a different audience, we'd be very happy to discuss how you can go about this. It's perfectly possible for organisations to adapt a toolkit or to use supporting materials provided by us to help to create a different offering. Once you've adapted your materials and added in your own content, you send them in to us for accreditation, and we would then check the materials against the requirements of the Carbon Literacy Standard. If you're on the call and you've joined us from overseas, we can also discuss how you can adapt the materials to your local context. Do I need to be a certified carbon literacy trainer to deliver the training? The course has been specifically designed to make it easy for anyone to pick up the materials, adapt the customizable slides to their local context, and then deliver a day's worth of action-based learning on climate change. In the pack, there's a comprehensive trainer manual that guides you through every step of the training and training tips. This means that you don't need to be a certified trainer to deliver the training to your peers. However, there is the option to become an accredited carbon literacy facilitator or trainer as a personal development opportunity. Another question that we often get asked is, how many people can we deliver training to in one cohort? We tend to recommend starting with 8 to 15 learners for your first cohort, if there's one trainer and another person to help manage group discussion. If possible, we'd always recommend using a facilitator to help deliver training. I'm now going to pass over to Kaylin, who's going to tell us more about next steps and how to get started. Over to you, Kaylin.
Thank you, Will. So obviously, you've heard a lot about our new Carbon Literacy Toolkit course, but how might you engage with this new course? How might you be able to attend or even deliver carbon literacy training using the Parish, Town and Community Councils course? So first, I would recommend visiting our events page where we share open carbon literacy courses. So we'll be sharing this link in the chat. Upcoming courses on that page include Save Our Shropshire, who have a date on May the 9th, July the 11th and September the 12th. The Society for Local Council Clerks actually have a training starting tomorrow, so the 21st of March. So if anyone's really keen, I think there's still spaces to sign up. So we'll share links for those two training sessions in the chat. I'd also just like to point out that there are many more open training sessions for parish, town and community councils to come. So please keep an eye on the events page where we will keep that up to date with any new open courses. I would recommend having a look on the Local Authorities Toolkit webpage. There are plenty of resources on there, including a Making the Case document. So essentially that's a document we've created to help councils or anyone within a local authority make the case for carbon literacy. So whether it's the financial case, the social case, and whether you need to put this to a decision maker within your council, it's got some really good arguments for making the case for carbon literacy training. Please also email me if you would like to request a copy of the Parish, Town and Community Councils course. If you're interested in running internal training, I can share the Toolkit course, but equally I can answer any questions you might have about how you might be able to run the training. And if you do start internal training, we host Delivering Successful Carbon Literacy workshops. So these are essentially 1 hour workshops that we run on Zoom. They're free of charge. We run one every month, and it essentially runs through all the the kind of key practical steps to how you might actually deliver training and how you might use a toolkit to do so. And then if you are set up, you are training, as I covered before, you can become a carbon literate organisation. So you could apply for your council to become a CLO. So we'll also put some links in there. And yeah, I think they are the main next steps. Please do email me if you're unclear on any of those. And I think now we will pass on to the Q&A. So got a next slide, Fiona. So I'm going to open up the session now and see if anyone has any particular questions. We do have a few from the Q&A already. So I'm going to start off with a question from Councillor Josephine Parish from, is it Corfe Castle? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Corfe Castle Parish Council. Josephine is also the chair of NALC's Smaller Councils Committee. So her question is particularly about smaller parish councils who have limited capacity. Many of them might contain climate deniers, and they might work with very small precepts. So how might these smaller councils be encouraged to do carbon literacy training? I think I'm actually going to take that question myself as the local authorities coordinator. So obviously my role has been up until now working with higher tier authorities to deliver the training. And many of the questions I get asked is still around capacity. So although they have bigger budgets, more staff, I think capacity is always a bit of an issue, especially with the kind of financial constraints that councils are under. Generally, I suggest that councils, you can get in touch with an external trainer, you can club together. And I think for parish councils, one of the main ways you might be able to encourage smaller councils to do carbon literacy training is to work with these higher tier authorities who can provide capacity, provide support, but also your county associations. We hope that making the Toolkit course available for county associations will help act as conveners for that training. So essentially, we'd like to rely on networks for the training. Oh, we've got Richard. Did you want to come in there, Richard?
Yeah, Ken, just to sort of reinforce what you're saying, we got a lot of small councils across Shropshire. And we found it really useful for, you know, those councils to get together in an open training course for two reasons. One is they, you know, share ideas, and then they can go back and apply it, and then they can work together afterwards as well. So I think something like that is good without sort of dealing with it on a council by council basis.
Yeah, exactly. I think there can be quite a really good kind of cross-pollination there, where you've got open councils, you can hear from best practice where other councils might be further ahead. So yeah, I think relying or getting engaged with networks is a really good way to support that. And obviously, Save Our Shropshire, you have some open training coming up. So if people are a bit unsure, they want to go on the training and hear what other councils are doing, I think that's a really good way of engaging with that.
I'd add, we don't stick to Shropshire.
Yeah, good point. It's open to, yeah, so. Okay, let's go to the next question. So we've got an anonymous attendee. And they ask, so do we have any advice if you're starting from a place where people, so your local council, are not engaged or have a climate emergency declaration? So I think maybe Phil, I'm going to come to you on this one as Director of Advocacy. How might you start to engage with people within your council, your community who aren't engaged on climate change? Where might you start?
It's a very, very crucial question, because this is so often, in some cases, this gets caught up in culture wars, all this woke and all this malarkey. And actually, I think it's a case of just finding that getting on point where perhaps a climate impact has made itself clear through an extreme weather event, for example, that has, for example, forced an unexpected spend, which knocks the rest of budget. There can be some very nuts and bolts things that bring the message home. We'd also always talk about framing this, as I mentioned before, to other folks' existing priorities. So is this about warm homes? In my job as Director of Advocacy, I'm often bringing the message home through multiple means that don't mention climate change. Sounds bizarre, but to take the example of warm homes equal less sick people, more disposable income, a better workforce, greater equalities, etc., is how you bring this home. And carbon literacy can facilitate that. It can give you the tools to bring that conversation home as well. So I suppose what I'm saying is actually there's no one answer, but look out for that getting on point to start the conversation, because there are so many ways that the imperative for climate action can be brought home to, let's say, even the most, I guess, the most stubborn resistance. Belinda, it looks like you want to come in here with perhaps a tale to tell.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's interesting because one of the projects we funded was we as a town council. Although I set up a 2030 vision project in order specifically to engage the local community, and ran some public events and had a stall at local activities with a series of questions and priorities, with people could put sort of happy smiley stickers on the ones that they felt most strongly about. But one of the projects we set up was community energy champions. So I sort of piggybacked on some training that the Centre for Sustainable Energy was doing with Bridport Town Council, one of our neighbouring towns. And within the town council, they really don't like the 2030 vision. They find it that basically some of the existing deniers are really, really uncomfortable with it. But the community energy champions they love, because we're talking about how to, we've bought thermal imaging cameras and are going around to people's homes and helping them find the cold spots or the damp spots, and then just sort of signposting, really. We're not qualified to give proper advice, but signposting to the various organisations in Dorset that can help and that can offer funding. So they love the community energy champions, which is a 2030 vision project, but they hate the 2030 vision. So I completely get it that we really need to talk about the health and well-being benefits and why these actions are actually better for us. And by the way, the co-benefit is we're going to reduce our carbon emissions.
Great, thank you, Belinda. Richard, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just to add to your point, Phil, we find this a lot in the various sessions we've done. There's sort of like one person in a council who sort of gets it, and then there's another 9 who don't. And so the education provides the one person with the ammunition or the material to go back and start to talk to people. But I think we would emphasize the need for someone like ourselves or some champion to get engaged and then go and deliver the message. So as a result of one of the ones that we've done recently, we're going to a local council and going to talk to them specifically about communication. On another occasion, we've been to a small council and we told them what needs to be done. So I think that follow-on work is an important part of the education process. To do exactly what you're talking about is to get the one to be able to talk to the other 8 and get them to recognize it's appropriate for them to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that again and again, I'll come to you in a second, Alan, it's about enabling people to realize how action on climate enables you, your organization, your community, your company to thrive. And once that penny drops, some of the resistance comes down. Alan, yeah.
Yeah, it's just to add to the fact about co-benefits. That's the one part of the course that everybody in this room, and I mean literally everybody in this room, can then look at from a business case point of view. If you're trying to convince people, apart from talking to the various people and the way they think, the co-benefits are the ones that actually come across to actually sell a particular angle that you want to go at in relation to something. So it's there's a suite of these co-benefits within the course material, and you just pick up where you want to go with that, and that's the best way of looking at it. That's why I love the course as a whole. It just gives everybody the confidence to go away and do something rather than just talk about it. Actually get on and deliver this.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alan. Caelan?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. That was really great. Yeah, I think co-benefits are obviously very key. It's making sure that you can speak to the various different interests and needs and relate that to climate change. So I think being able to speak to a wide variety of interests is a very key part there. So I've got a next question from Andrew Malifant. So Andrew has asked, will the project or the toolkit direct people to sources of good practice? So how do they carry out actions? So how do we give any examples? Do we kind of show best practice in other parish, town and community councils? Would anyone like to come in there? Perhaps Will or anyone who's delivered the training?
I can do that. Bottom line is yes, and throughout the course material, there are examples across the country as to what local parish and town councils have achieved, and various ways in which people can think, well, okay, if we can't do it as a parish council on our own, how do we collaborate with other parish councils to achieve that as well? So there's various ways. It sparks the way to move forward. Is probably the better way of looking at it. But the examples are sound. They're actually built on facts. So, you know, you could go away, talk to that council and learn from them what those, how can I put it, save you making the same mistakes. You can actually go to them and say, okay, what's a shortcut to this? And that's how we push it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks very much, Alan. Sorry, you go, Richard.
Sorry. All I was going to say, I was going to add that we've got some stuff on our website which shares some of the best practice, and then there's an excellent organisation in Herefordshire, which is the Great Collaboration, which pulls together lots of projects so people can share that. But what Andrew is raising is a very important point, that there needs to be more ability for people to share best practice instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's a really, really good point. But the start is made in the course.
Thanks, Richard. So I was just reaching for my unmute button there, but I just wanted to add my thanks to the National Association of Local Councils, who have very kindly granted us to use case studies of best practice climate action as well. Thanks, Kaylin.
Thank you, everyone. I'd also just like to point out that we also have a resources document as part of the training. So once people go on training using the Local Authorities Toolkit, a trainer will share a follow-up document with, I mean, there's absolutely plenty of materials in there to kind of carry on the training. There's best practice examples, there's tools to find out what else you can do. So it's not just about going on the training, but also what you do after it. And the actions are very much, they are focused on taking action, but also practicing action so that when it comes to your next decision, you factor in climate change and you've got that resources document to help you. Just seeing if we have any more questions. So please do pop your questions in the Q&A if you have a particular question. You can also direct them to any one of us if you would like a specific answer. I'm just coming to David Owen's question, just asking if there are any trainers available in Northumberland. So I'll actually just put you in touch, David, with Northumberland County Council, who are excellent carbon literacy advocates. They've been working on with us on a number of courses, so I'll put you in touch there. So, I mean, do any of our panelists have any questions that they would like to ask or raise while we're waiting for some to come through on the Q&A?
I think there's a great question that's just come in from Rachel Blackmore on when can we do the training and how do we book? So there are we've got some links in the chat to upcoming courses that are coming up.
And also, I mean, we can send those links out to you. Don't worry. I saw the note there saying someone's having trouble getting the links copied from the chat. We'll do a follow-up email if you've registered here with those links and the like. So much of what we've been talking about is cascades here, isn't it? It's how one bit of best practice can transmit, inspire others, can be adapted, utilized wherever you are. So this is how we've seen carbon literacy grow across sectors. And if you're feeling a little bit, we've got a hill to climb here. The other thing that we're picking up is that the goalposts are moving in spite of the stuff that's going to come out of the IPCC today. The fact that we do have a lot to do. The goalposts are moving in conversations, and we're gaining more and more advocates as we go around the necessity and the benefits of climate action. So have the confidence in that and know that you're in good company as well. Richard, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say to Rachel, I mean, there are a number of open courses to which there are links, but I'm sure any of the trainers that are around would be happy to, if necessary, work direct with a group if they're big enough. I mean, the numbers that Will said before of 8 to 15 is about what you need. And if someone wants to get 8 to 15 people together, I'm sure that can be organised direct. It doesn't have to stick with what we've already organised. Flexible enough to organise something in between.
I'm just going to come to a question from Kate Larson. So she asks, it sounds as though town and parish councils should lobby their county council to get the toolkit, and then they can deliver it. So that's a really good question, and it's something that I would like to see. So I'd really like to see engagement from parish, town and community councils with their county council or their unitary authority. We hope that those councils who are now rolling out the training internally can then support with their parish, town or community councils in the area to deliver the training. So we really want to see those kind of networks and yes, mutual support within the local authorities sector. So hopefully, as my role as local authorities coordinator, I can facilitate some of that networking. Let's see if we have any more questions. So Kate Larson asks how large groups of 20 odd people have they been trained at town council levels? So maybe Will, you could, or Alan, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, it's possible to do 20. What we do is just bring in additional people to help with the breakout rooms so that the sessions run well rather than crowd them. That's the simplest solution from our point of view. So people around the room we'll just simply call them in and sort of say, can you help out on X day? We've got, what was it, 20 odd. So yeah, it can be done, and it doesn't detract them from the training, because ideally with the peer-to-peer sessions that we have in the breakout rooms, that's where a lot of the stuff gets embedded. There's no question about it, because they ask each other questions and that learning comes out of that question, well, that dialogue between them. Then they come back into the session and then they effectively deliver what they've just discussed in there. So there's even more cross-pollination again. So, you know, that's why they go away so confident at the end, because they've heard fellows talking about it, and it just helps. It helps them embed it. That way they walk away more confidently.
And I think it's just worth reinforcing what you're saying there, Alan, which is that one of the great things about the material is it's not just a slide fest. There's also a lot of breakout sessions and videos to break it up. So when you get a large group, you can get the discussion going on amongst the people who are on there. And I think that's probably one of the more valuable parts of the course, is where people can share thoughts and ideas in those breakout sessions. And you can manage that fairly easily with up to 20, 24 people.
Yeah, and you definitely need the 8 hours to get it done.
Yeah, definitely. As I always say, you can't really relate to can't relate climate change to someone's very specific role without a long enough training session. So people often ask, could you do training for 1 or 2 hours? But to relate climate change to the very specific things that people do at local authorities or in other roles, it's, yeah, you need a full day. So yeah. Okay, I think it's 3 minutes past 12. I think we're going to officially end the session now. But if you would like to stick around for a Q&A after, so if you want to ask us a particular question, you can. You can also get in touch with me at localauthorities@carbonliteracy.com. We've got all the various social media links down there. Please do check out our website as well. There is plenty of information there. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. I look forward to hearing from many of you very soon, so we can start to roll out this training across parish, town and community councils.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Right. I don't know if Claudine's still in the room.
Claudian, if you've got a question, please could you drop it into the Q&A, please?
Yes. I think the best way, well, is I've got a question in front of me, is to actually use the local people to the best advantage. So they become your climate change champions. So it's down to the parish council to identify these individuals within their locality. And that's what we do on the course. We actually ask them to get engaged with these people, ask them to come forward. And you heard Belinda earlier on talking about specific groups that came forward wanting funding and all the rest of it. That's one way in, but the other way in is to get the councillors to actually go and address and find them and sort of say, look, we're in a position to help. Can or do you want our help? And that's the thing that comes out of the training, that they go seek people. So it's the other way around for a change. I don't know if that helps, Claudian, but that's an example of how to get people on board. Our local authority actually advertised for what's called climate change champions. So they're actually canvassing for them and then bring them forward, and they actually do internal training themselves. So that's one form of doing it.
I'd also add, Alan, Claudian seems to have a question there about a template for an action plan for parish and town council. If she sends her an email or whatever, I mean, we've got one already, and can share that with her if she wants.
That'd be really useful, thank you. Councillor Laura Cook just had a question that I'll answer now. I think she asked it recently, so I think she might still be here. So she just asked how much the training is, because her clerk has said it would be £140, but this session has said £10 per person. So I'll just clear that up quickly. So the £10 is a certification fee. So each learner that goes on the training, they submit their pledges to the Carbon Literacy Project. We review them, and if they passed, so it's about a 90% pass rate. So most people who've gone on the full day's worth of training, most people pass. That's a £10 application fee. Obviously, the delivery of the training takes a lot of someone's time, and so the cost that an external provider charges is not related to that £10 per person. That's just the application fee.
If you have any more questions at all, please do keep popping them in the Q&A. Belinda, I see that you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Yes, thanks. I thought of something and then forgot it, so put my hand back down again. One of the things that I've learned from being a councillor is just, I think generally a lot of town and parish councillors in particular, but probably also local authority level, are quite risk aversive, because they, you know, we are safeguarding public money, and we are acting as you know, advocates for our community, but also sort of, if you like, managing the way the local authority or the town and parish council runs their finances. And you know, we are sort of in effect employers and performance managers, as well as representing the interests of our community. So there's a sort of inherent risk aversion. So the more we can show that the community, you know, because in general, the public are sort of ahead of the politicians in the responses to the, you know, to wanting climate and environmental action. So the more we can demonstrate the confidence that the community has in, this is what we would like you to do, and sort of knit those various elements together to kind of yeah, give councillors the confidence that this is the right thing that we should be doing, is important. And again, we were talking earlier on about making it about people's health and well-being, because most climate actions, they do require some sort of change, and people are wary of change, but it's good change. So the more we can say that, the better.
Thanks, Belinda. Yeah, I think I completely agree there. That was a really well made point. Thank you. And Christiane, did you have?
Yes. Yeah, just to follow on those points by Belinda about, you know, the risk averse and co-benefits. It's specifically at the council where I'm at, having had the climate strategy and being some big projects have been put out there with heat pumps, solar panels, EV chargers. When you actually go back and, because that could be sometimes the reason why people say, oh, you know, that's not really for us, but just seeing sometimes the finances of it all and how quickly the money will come back. And actually it would be, you know, a crime not to do it. And on top of it, yes, you make the carbon savings and all the other co-benefits come with it by supporting the residents who haven't got the space to have an EV charger because they are renting or living in accommodation where it's just not feasible. Then being there and being that facilitator really shows how the council is the enabler. And just to say again, yeah, there's so many grants out there as well that are supporting some of those schemes. So the money on investment shouldn't really be the barrier. If anything, it's actually there to make money further down the line and to support the council itself, but also all the residents with co-benefits like air pollution being reduced and just so many others there. So just to help on that supportive barrier seems to be a bit of an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something, yeah, in our Making the Case document, we try and speak to as well. It's obviously, it can be an investment, but it also, it will pretty much all the time be a long-term saving as well. So it's just important to make that point. Thanks, Christiane. Alan, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, it's to follow up when you do stuff like I was saying, and when I said about installing LEDs in our particular area, it isn't just installing these things to save energy, and it isn't about that side of things. And as the question in the chat says, why they're suggesting they're not going to do it. Well, that's a decision for them. But our decision was based on the science that was actually produced in Holland in relation to insect predation. So as a result, we bought the computerized LEDs where you can actually preset times that the luminosity is high and then reduce it over a period of time so the arachnids aren't eating their way through the insect population. And this is the research that's been done. So that's why we installed them with that knowledge and with that pre-programmed computerized settings. So it isn't a question of why aren't we doing this? It's a question of why are we not doing it right? And the question is using the science to its best value and actually applying stuff as we know it today and try and future-proof it. So when you're doing stuff as a parish and town council, it isn't just, oh, yeah, that's the cheapest one. No, what you need to look at is what's the carbon footprint of this? What's the impact of installing it? And all those things get built into the decision-making processes. Now, if you are on and been on this course and understand the logistics of what's going on behind it, you will actually appreciate all the other stuff that gets built into that decision making. And that's why it's important to get people to understand the full understanding of today's knowledge and growing knowledge, and more to come. But the point is, it's the best fix at this time. And that's what you implement, because that's what's required at that time. It's no different to the Model T compared with the an electric vehicle these days. Things have moved on. We need to move forward. And this is one where we need to move forward. We can't keep kicking the can down the road on this one. We need to act now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I think that's a really well made point. I think it's important to not kind of perfect ourselves out of not doing things. I think that's one point there. And also, yeah, just about decisions. And that's where carbon literacy comes in. We're all making decisions all the time. And often it's just finances or the social case, or there's many different decisions and things we take into account. But often climate change, people might not feel empowered, they might not feel knowledgeable, they might just not feel able to take that into account. So that's where carbon literacy hopefully comes in and helps those people to take climate change and emissions as part of that decision making. So thanks very much there. I think we might be, well, we're out of questions for now. So unless anyone has anything else to share, I think we might round up there. Okay, well, thank you all very much for coming. It's been really, really enjoyable. It's amazing to see so many people joining as part of this session and the real interest in the Toolkit course. So I'm very excited to hear more and work on this with everyone on the call. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Really appreciate it.